right, good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody feeling out here in Reality Alley today? It's the Sunday afternoon jam session of our Lowell Celebrates Kerouac festivities, our 2023 Fall Festival. Festival's been going great all weekend. Yeah, if you just sort of stumbled in here and you wonder what's going on, this is the Lowell Celebrates Kerouac Fall Festival. You see the bucket on the back fence over there? We are a 501c3 nonprofit, all volunteer grassroots organization. Any donations you could make would help us do this again next year, and that's what we do year after year. We celebrate Jack in his hometown, and this Sunday is typically blocked out. It has been for decades now for what we call the Amram Jam. Hey, who here's familiar with the Amram Jam? Right. Some of you folks come only exclusively every year for the Amram Jam because it's a thing unto itself. David Amram, for anybody who might be wondering, could not make it to Lowell this weekend. He was diagnosed with COVID on Wednesday. He's doing fine, but he's in quarantine till tomorrow. So we are without our, I will call him our big chief of LCK when it comes to jazz poetry. David Amram couldn't be here today, but we are rolling forward with the open jam. And in that way, Mike, as president of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, I usually just do the emceeing and hosting, but I figured
you got to be Amram today.
I ain't gonna be Amram, and
without the French horn.
And I don't think I could do it, right? But because I'm not a musician, for one thing, and I'm not a poet either. But I like to read, and Jack is what it's all about here for Lowell Celebrates Kerouac, right?
Yeah.
So I figured we're doing it in the Golden Eternity. So I would start us off with a piece that I read one time down at the commemorative event when we actually did. I don't know if you ever heard about this, but on the 50th anniversary of Jack's passing, I actually organized a jazz funeral at the commemorative for Jack, and we had the Revolutionary Snake Ensemble lead the second line with David Amram, and I read this poem from Jack, which. This is the open jam, right? We're going to get free today. This is a piece of writing that Jack said he allowed himself complete and total freedom in. Some of you may recognize it. He recorded a couple of the pieces that I'm going to read on a record. But it really, in my mind, is one of the most musical pieces of writing I've ever heard. And I'm going to start us off with a little bit from Old Angel Midnight, ladies and gentlemen. Friday afternoon in the universe. In all directions, in and out, you got your men, women, dogs, children, horses, pones, ticks, parts, pans, pools, pauls, pails, parturiences, and petty thieveries that all turn into heavenly Buddha. And I know what I'm talking about because I made the world, and when I made it, I no lie had Old Angel Midnight for my name, and concocted up a world so nothing you had forever thereafter to make believe it's real. But that's alright, because now everything will be alright, and we'll soothe the forever boys and girls, and before we're through, we'll find a name for this goddamn golden eternity and tell a story too. But did you ever read a story as vast as this that begins on Friday afternoon with working men on scaffolds painting white paint, and ants marrying in little black dens, and microbes warring in your kidney, and messerules microbing in the innards of mercury, and microbes dreaming of the ultimate microbehood, which then ultimates outward to the endless vast empty atom that is this imaginary universe, ending nowhere, Nerian born as Bankei well pulled when he ferried his mother over the rocks to Twat UT, and people visit his hut to inquire, what other planet features this? And then he answers, what other planet? Though the sounds of the entire world are now swimming through Mrs. Macardiola's Twando and old Poke's home, drunk again, and of course you hear the cats wailing in the whale bow, wild bar, wart fence, moonlight, midnight, angel, dolphin, immensity, visions of the tot that got the seeds of purity and womb. So here is all this infinite, immaterial, meadow-like golden ash, swims swarming in our enlightened brains, and still we refuse, the naked and blank, to hear the what, the who, To what you will stay the diamond boat and Pressapine, Recipine, Milltown, Heroine, fact machines, the silver ages everlasting, swarm swallowing in a simple broom, and at night you raise the square white light from your ghost neath the root drinking tree, and coyote won't hear you, but you'll ward off the inexistency devils just to pass the time away. Meanwhile, it's timeless to the ends of the last light year. It might as well be getting late Friday afternoon. Where we start, so his old sound can come home when works are done and drink his beer and tweak his children's eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, a little bit of the opening of Old Angel Midnight right there. The words of Jack Kerouac, and I'm so excited to say that kicking off our LCK 2023 Open Jam today is the living legend himself, the one and only Mr. John Sinclair, ladies and gentlemen.
Man, I always like to say that on October 2nd, 1957, I turned 16 years old. 2 weeks prior to that, they published On the Road by Jack Kerouac. I got it as soon as it came out. It totally changed my life. I never heard of marijuana before that. For example. What a great book. And all of his other books, I got them as soon as they came out, and I went back, of course, and read his first novel, The Town and the City. Based here in Lowell. Well, they called it Galloway, I believe. But right here, Jack walked these streets, and of course they had to carry him home off the streets on many a night, they say. You like to have a drink, Jack? Okay, I'd like to do 2 poems. The first is called Brillaint Corners. It's written after the Thelonious Monk composition of the same name, which if you don't know it, you should listen to it tonight when you get home. And it's dedicated to my pal Steve Hager, former editor of High Times magazine, and the great Paul Krasner, who I don't have to tell you who he was. He invented the underground press with this great magazine called The Realist. I was a subscriber. You too. They didn't have very much outness in daily life in America in those days. If you were a white person, it was hard to find out anything beyond Ike. But there it was. When you found Kerouac, he opened the door to the other world. Okay, Brillaint Corners. Out of the darkness of the Second World War, before the soldiers came back to turn America into a vast suburban wasteland, dreamed up by real estate developers with huge dollar signs in their eyes and nothing at all in their hearts. Out of the darkness of American life in the first half of the 40s, when the only rays of light were cast in nightclubs and after-hours joints, illuminated by the music of the most adventurous of Americans, Thelonious Monk at the piano, Charlie Parker on saxophones, Dizzy Gillespie on trumpet, Kenny Clark at the drums. Brilliant corners of modern civilization flooded with light and intelligence, a bright beacon ahead through the desolate landscape of post-war America. And sitting in the corner at Minton's Playhouse in the middle of the night, digging the band like crazy, a hip football player and would-be sports writer from Lowell, Massachusetts, who also wrote stories for the school paper like Lester Young is 10 years ahead of his time. True that. So well known at Minton's in Harlem that the musicians on the set named a song after him. Kerouac, Jean-Louis, known as Tijan, or Jack, the great bard of modern America, who would turn the genius rhythms of bebop into dynamite literature. On the Road, Dr. Sachs, Dharma Bums, The Subterraneans, Mexico City Blues, The Scripture of the Golden Eternity. A vast, trembling body of visionary writings that reshaped American life in every possible way. And Allen Ginsberg, fellow student at Columbia, son of a poet, school teacher, and a mad red housewife, incipient bard of the future from Paterson, New Jersey, who would see the specter of Blake in his dormitory room and hallucinate a solitary rose on the clothes hanger in his closet and inscribe great visionary odes on the windows of our skulls. Howell, America, Sunflower Sutra, Kaddish, and hundreds more. Kerouac and Ginsberg, looking for their kicks among the petty criminals and dope fiends of Times Square. Kerouac was arrested as an accessory to murder. Ginsberg went to the nut house to beat a stolen property beef. And they met up with their mentor in this seedy milieu, a street-level philosopher and junkie and queer, a renegade from the genteel environs of upper-middle-class life in the city of St. Louis, a member of the family that invented the adding machine, and on his mother's side, the man who founded the public relations industry. William Seward Burroughs turned the language around and pointed it back at the squares who had stripped it of its meaning and blew up the sky with his revolutionary writings. Naked Lunch, Nova Express, The Soft Machine, The Ticket That Exploded. Kerouac and Ginsberg and Burroughs in New York City in the years after the war, when Bird ruled the music with his magnificent recordings for Dial and Savoy, and Dizzy's big band was playing Things to Come and Cubana Pop, and Thelonious Monk would make the first recordings of his incredible compositions in the fall of 1947. And a young man from Denver blew onto the scene straight off the fur range of the Rocky Mountains with enormous Western energy and fast talking wit and the ability to park a car anywhere he wanted. Neil Cassidy drove across the landscape like a metaphor for change, turning literature inside out and making life itself a complex work of art. Immortalized by Kerouac in On the Road and Visions of Cody, and by Ginsberg as in Howell as Coxman and Adonis of Denver, secret hero of these poems, author of the first third and a human bridge who connected the 50s with the 60s from behind the wheel of a bus named Further, pushing America farther than it had ever gone before, with a new vision of a new world given life by the practice of its dreamers, propelled by Allen Ginsberg, tireless proselytizer for the creations of his friends who schlepped their manuscripts from publisher to publisher for 10 years until On the Road and Naked Lunch were finally brought to press. And Howell was arrested and tried for obscenity. And the Beat Generation was in Time magazine. And young people in America suddenly wanted to know where they could get some marijuana. And the road of the stashes began to open up and out in front of us. And we followed it. And we followed it! Brillaint Corners, Thelonious Monk. Okay, I was commissioned by my pal Frenchie, the great Randy Frechette of Lowell, Massachusetts, who lives in New Orleans, and he paints music as it's happening. He's a great painter, one of my closest friends in the whole world. He and I were here together last year, and we did something at the La bookstore, painting and poetry together. Well, this year, one of our close friends, the great New Orleans drummer named Russell Baptiste, passed away last week at the age of 57. So the obituary is in today's New York Times. And the Baptiste family, which is a huge clan of brilliant musicians in New Orleans, asked Frenchie if he would paint a portrait of Russell to put in the coffin. So that's what Frenchie's doing today instead of being here with us. So he said Mike Flynn has put together a beautiful tribute to David Amram, who would normally be leading our session here today. And would you write a poem for Amram? I said, fuck yes. God willing, I will. So God was willing, and I did. It's called Ou-Bop Sh'Bam, Amram. And I should say that I heard Amram and met Amram for the first time in about 1996 in New Orleans. They had this great event called the Insomniac-a-thon. In New Orleans, we did 24 hours of uninterrupted poetry. In Louisville, they did 48 hours. Bad motherfuckers. So I had a really good band with 2 saxophone players, rhythm section. And I was performing my works for the people I lived with in New Orleans. So it was a big occasion for me. And in the audience were my 3 greatest mentors that were alive: Robert Creeley, Amiri Baraka, and Ed Sanders. And I got to read my poems, my mature work, for the guys that inspired me to write this. So it was a big thrill for me. And I'm up and I start my set and I look over and there's a guy at a French horn in my band. When the fuck did he come? And it was Amram. And I had never met him before and he'd never heard me before, and he just came up and played in my band. Played his ass off. So I love Amram and I come here. I've been coming to the Poetry Festival, the Kerouac Festival here for quite a few years. Long before they would recognize me by Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. So being an advocate and a follower of Jack Kerouac, I thought, Lowell Celebrates Kerouac is just about the greatest literary event in America. If you went to my hometown of Flint, Michigan, they would deny that I even lived there. Let alone there wouldn't be no park with my works carved in gold on marble stelae. This is the shit for a writer, I'm telling you the truth. To come here and see that a city has adopted This guy who was a questionable character when he was alive, and he gave him a lot of trouble. But now they've accepted him, and it's a beautiful thing. And Amram, well, it was a thrill for me, and it's always a thrill because Amram and Jack Kerouac invented what I do, poetry with music. I usually have music. So it was a big thrill to write a poem for Amram. This is it. There was this kid growing up on a farm in Pennsylvania who wanted to be a musician and a composer of music, and did so by the age of 11, playing the piano, the trumpet, and French horn, and writing music of his own every day, instead of playing baseball, say, or going to the movies, or anything but the relentless pursuit of his music and his development as a teenage intellectual and lifelong weirdo who composed thousands of pieces for every conceivable ensemble and could conduct his orchestras as well. A brilliant mastermind of music who was tight with Dizzy Gillespie and Thelonious Monk in the late 1940s. Ran a jam session out of his tiny basement apartment in Washington, D.C. in the early 50s, where Charlie Parker and hundreds of other cats would crowd the room and make their incredible music. And in 1955, he was adopted as a member of the Charles Mingus Ensemble. And on the bandstands of Harlem and 52nd Street, and wherever the genius cats would gather to pursue their artistic ambitions. Ou-Bop Sh'Bam, Amram, Ou-Bop Sh'Bam, David Amram. And in October of 1957, Amram and Jack Kerouac staged the first jazz and poetry event in New York City, with many more to follow. Plus the Alfred Leslie film, Pull My Daisy, in 1959, shot by Robert Frank, with Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, Gregory Corso, and Larry Rivers, with music composed by Amram, always on the set, always with his horns in his hands, and a bag full of flutes and exotic percussion instruments, always ready to take the piano, or put his French horn to his lips, or shake a tail feather, until everything that can and must be said has been said. And then heads back to his desk and his manuscripts and his transcriptions, day after day, year after year, now in his 90s, still killing his audiences every time he appears. And he never stops going. He never stops. He goes and goes and goes. Ou-Bop Sh'Bam, Amram, Ou-Bop Sh'Bam, the one and only David Amram. Amram. Get well soon, my brother. Now you're gonna have to wheel me the fuck out of here. Sorry.
Let's hear it for John Sinclair, ladies and gentlemen. And let's say happy birthday. This last weekend he made 82. Going strong, and an open invitation of Lowell Celebrates Kerouac. Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you so much. We're going to get going in just a few moments. We'll get this out of the way.
You don't have to invite me to a Kerouac event. I'll be there anyway. You're invited every year. All right.